today I'm going to be showing you how to make different kinds of decorations and trinket bowls from air dry clay. It's a really fun and inexpensive way of making Christmas presents and little gifts to give to other people. So you can make things like these little Christmas decorations, or you can make little autumn decorations, or really sweet little trinket bowls for rings that you can paint yourself and figure out different designs. So I'll be showing you a couple of techniques and how I made these items today. So today you're going to need a couple of kind of inexpensive items, including air dry clay, baking paper, a craft knife, a paintbrush, a jar of water, a rolling pin, or a glass jar will also work if you don't have a rolling pin, a round object like a glass or sellotape to draw around, a cupcake tray for moulding bowls, and some fine grit sandpaper. So the baking paper is for kind of taping down onto the table. It really just means that the air dry clay doesn't stick to the table, so it doesn't ruin your designs. So first off, I'm kind of just rolling the clay into a ball and getting it kind of to a nice even shape with my hands. And then once I've done that, I'm just taking my rolling pin, like I say, you could use a glass, and just rolling it out so it's smooth and the same kind of thickness all the way through. You don't want to roll it particularly thin, because then your air dry clay decorations will be delicate and much more likely to break. So I'd say you'd want it kind of 1 to 2 centimeters thickness. Now I'm just kind of drawing out my design quite simply. This is just a heart shape for me to cut out with a craft knife. I would recommend using a craft knife. It's quite difficult to cut out using any other kind of knife, so craft knife really helpful in that sense, but you don't have to be too perfect when you're cutting this out. And make sure you save the excess clay so you can use that for other decorations. Now I'm just using a small amount of water to kind of smooth out the edges of my decoration. I just use my fingers because I prefer doing that, and it gets rid of any kind of little imperfections. And then I'm using a pen to make a little hole for some ribbon or thread to go through once the air dry clay decoration has dried. And now I'm just going to show you some footage of me cutting out different designs and just kind of going over what we've done already for different decorations. So for this decoration, I'm using some dried flowers that I have and the rolling pin to kind of roll them into the design and create an indented design on the air dry clay. This looks so lovely with real flowers and can make like really great presents for people in your life who love nature. And I think they just make really lovely decorations, and the clay really picks up a high level of detail, which is really nice. And then again, I'm just using water to kind of smooth around the edges to make a bit of a smoother shape. Like, no shapes are particularly perfect when working with air dry clay when I'm working with it, but I kind of like that. I think it gives it a bit more of a natural feel and a bit more of a nice homemade feel, which I really enjoy. I'm just putting a hole in the top because I'm going to make this one just into a little like hanging ornament as a Christmas present. But you could use all sorts of different kinds of leaves. You could use, I think, ferns would be really beautiful. Rosemary can work quite well. Any kind of seed heads can be pressed in. There's loads of room to experiment with that kind of stuff. Now I'm just rolling this shape out and I'm going to do another one. Right, so I've got another little chunk of clay and I'm just rolling it out again, and this time I'm going to be making like a little trinket dish. These are really lovely presents or just for personal use, to keep your earrings in, your jewellery in, your keys, any kind of like chains, all those little things that never really have a home. So what I'm doing is I'm rolling out the clay. For trinket dishes, the clay, it's not as important how thick it is, because they're a little bit less delicate than the ornaments. But I still wouldn't roll it too thin. I'm then using a roll of sellotape as a guide to kind of cut out a round circular shape. Again, it doesn't matter if it's perfect. It doesn't have to be. It's quite nice to kind of have that organic feel. You can see I've slipped a bit there, but I'm just going back over. So I'm then lifting off this excess clay, which I'll put to the side. When you're not kind of using your clay, your air dry clay, make sure that you keep it wrapped up. Otherwise it'll dry out and it will be a bit more difficult to use. So make sure you kind of keep it in its plastic bag. And now again, I'm just using water and my finger to kind of smooth around the edges here and kind of create a nice smooth edge, get rid of any kind of bumps or imperfections, and make a nice smooth surface. Now once I'm happy with this shape, this is where the cake tins come in handy, cupcake tins, and I just use them to kind of like press this circle down a bit so you get kind of an indented bowl. When it dries, it's going to be really easy to just lift out. So I find these really helpful to make little bowls. Once I've done that, I'm just going around the edges again with my finger and kind of smoothing out any lines that I want to get rid of. If you don't have a cupcake tin, even just like the bottom of a drinking glass can be fine. You can just do this by kind of putting your circle over the bottom of the glass and using that to mould it. But there shouldn't be any problems with it kind of popping off once it's dry. There shouldn't be any resistance. Now I'm just using the technique earlier of rolling the flowers into the clay again, but this time I'm going to make this one into a trinket dish rather than a decoration. So once again you can see how nice that indent is there actually, how it comes out really nicely. So I'm just going to draw around my sellotape again to make a little circle for this one. So once that's done, just putting the excess clay to the side, just going to trim off some of those little edges there, and I'm going to use my finger to smooth out these edges again. Once again, just using the same method, pressing this really gently so you don't lose any of that indentation, pressing that really gently just into the cupcake kind of cases. And then again, just smoothing out the edges where I've kind of caught them or squashed them a little bit until I'm happy with how it looks. Once you've done this, you're going to leave everything to dry for 24 to 48 hours. If you really need to speed that process up, you can pop them in the oven. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this, as sometimes it can cause the clay to crack, but it can be okay if you only put them in for like 10 minutes. Once it's dry, I just use some fine sandpaper to get rid of some of the kind of rough edges. I think this gives it like a much better finish. Again, you have to be really gentle because the clay is very delicate. I've definitely broken pieces in the past by being too kind of ham-fisted. So it does happen, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm just kind of smoothing these edges that you can see here with the fine sandpaper. I think I got this from Wilkinson's, and it was pretty inexpensive, but it's quite helpful into smoothing your pieces. So once your pieces are kind of smooth and dry and you're happy with them, you can start by painting kind of a white base coat. You don't have to paint a white base coat if the background of your decoration is going to be a light colour anyway, then you can just start with that. I just recommend if you want to paint a dark colour or a medium colour, then paint a light colour first because it'll stand out a lot better. I just use acrylic paint. I wouldn't recommend using something like ink because if you want to seal it afterwards with like a waterproof sealer, they can kind of run, whereas acrylic paint it's not going to smudge if you seal it afterwards. But yeah, I'm just using white acrylic paint here. I'm pretty sure you could use gouache and that would be absolutely fine. I just didn't have any at the moment. So now you can kind of start painting your designs on. I actually watered down my acrylic paint a little bit because it made it easier to paint fine details when it's not as thick. I've sped up this process for you because it would be really long to just kind of watch me paint, and you'll get the same idea with it sped up. But yeah, I'm just gonna add in some videos of how I painted some of my designs. You can kind of design them first in a sketchbook if you want to plan out what you're doing first, or you can just freehand it like I did. I take most of my inspiration from nature and shapes that I would find in nature. So now that I've painted all my designs, I'm using a waterproof agent, which is basically like a varnish. So this is the one I'm using. It's a Peebo a waterproofing agent. I got it on eBay for around £5, and there's loads in it, so it's super affordable. At first it looks quite yellow, but it dries clear, which you'll see later on in the video, and it just gives your decorations a bit more protection from cracking and scuffing and weathering, whilst also making them look kind of shiny and a little bit more professional, which I think is nice. But yeah, I'd say it's definitely worth investing in a waterproofing agent. It's not necessary for your pieces, but because this one was only £5, I would really recommend getting it. There are quite a lot out there, but this one works absolutely fine for me, so that's what I'd recommend going for. And here you can see how they've dried. They're just slightly shiny and completely clear. And this is the one with the gold ink. I would say that the ink kind of ran, the gold ink ran when I kind of glazed it, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend using that first, but maybe you could add it after you've glazed them as a little bit of decoration. Thank you for watching. If you do make anything inspired by this video, then I'd love to see it, and you can find me at Instagram and tag me and share what you've made. That would be lovely. If you do want to get into contact with me, my email's just on the screen, so feel free to drop me a message if you've got any questions.